Hey, today I'm going to make some homemade cinnamon rolls. Let me show you what I got going on here. For this recipe, you're going to need some all-purpose flour, some salt, some yeast, a little bit of sugar, 2 sticks of butter, a little bit of Crisco shortening, some whole milk, an egg, ground cinnamon, brown sugar, confectioner sugar, and an entire block of cream cheese. The first thing I want to do is a little bit of prep work. I want to butter the bowl that I'm going to rise my dough in, and I'm going to go ahead and butter the pan that I'm going to cook it in. Another thing I'm going to do is go ahead and preheat my oven to 350 degrees. As soon as it comes up to 350 degrees, I'm going to turn the oven off, because all I'm going to do is use that warm space, because it's a little chilly in my house today, to rise the dough. Every time I proof the dough, I'm going to put the dough in the turned off oven. It just will help things move along a little quicker. So I'm just going to put a tablespoon of butter into each of these containers and butter these up real good. And I'm just going to use my clean hands to butter these dishes. Now that these are buttered, I'm just going to set them to the side and wash my hands, and then we'll make the dough for our cinnamon rolls. In this great big bowl, I'm going to put 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And then I'm also going to add another 3 tablespoons of flour. Editing Brandy here. As I was putting this video together, I realized I forgot to include a note about the recipe. If you want your dough to be a lighter, fluffier cinnamon roll, like that really soft texture, omit the extra 3 tablespoons of flour. And then there's going to be another note further along in the video, another thing that you would need to do if you don't add the extra 3 tablespoons of flour. Then I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar. Then I'm going to add 2.25 teaspoons of yeast. You can use the rapid rise yeast, or you can use the regular rise yeast. Because this recipe is going to proof twice, it doesn't matter which yeast you use. The traditional yeast is totally fine. So again, 2.25 teaspoons. And then we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Mix that all up together. And then scoot your bowl of dry mixture over to the side. Then in a big mixing cup, you're going to put in a 1/2 cup of whole milk and a 1/4 cup of water. And then I'm going to warm up my milk and water in the microwave for about 45 seconds to a minute. So I warmed my milk and water up in the microwave. To that, I am going to add 3 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of Crisco shortening. I am going to pour all of this into my flour and yeast mixture. Going to give that a stir. Then I'm going to add 1 egg. And that's about as far as you want to take your mixing. You just kind of want to make it into a shaggy, sticky dough. Then I'm just going to add the smallest bit of flour to my clean counter. If you didn't add that extra 3 tablespoons of flour earlier in the recipe to get that lighter texture in your cinnamon rolls, when you go to knead your dough, you are going to need to add a little more flour to your counter and sprinkle over the top. You're going to add and incorporate a little more flour as you need, because it's going to be really, really sticky if you omit that extra 3 tablespoons of flour. You don't want to add too much flour to the dough at this point, because it'll make it too tough. Sprinkle a tiny bit of flour over the top. Then you're going to knead this dough for 10 minutes. There's something about that 10-minute mark that just is going to make your dough the right consistency. So I'm going to knead this dough for 10 minutes. If it starts to stick to the counter, I might add a tiny little bit more flour, but I probably won't need to.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Okay, then in this last little minute of kneading, you just kind of want to roll it around on the counter until it makes a pretty smooth ball. And it's going to feel a little bit like Play-Doh. Then I'm going to put my ball of dough into my buttered bowl and roll it around in here a little bit so that it's nice and coated with butter. And then I'm going to cover this up with a clean cloth. And I am going to put it in the turned off preheated oven. And I'm going to crack the oven door a little bit. And I'm going to let this stay in there for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, until it's doubled in size. But I think it's only going to take an hour. While my dough is rising this first time, I'm going to go ahead and mix up the cinnamon filling. All that is in that is 1/3 of a cup of packed brown sugar and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. And then just mix that up together. And then just set this to the side until you're ready for it. Another thing I'll do while my dough is rising is mix up the frosting for the cinnamon rolls. And all that is an entire block of softened cream cheese and 4 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to mix this together. And this bowl is nowhere near big enough, so I need to grab a bigger bowl, like twice the size. And then to this cream cheese and butter mixture, I'm going to add 1.5 cups of confectioner's sugar. And then just mix your cream cheese and butter and confectioner's sugar until they start getting together. And then I'm going to throw in a splash of vanilla. And then you're going to set this to the side. My dough has been sitting in the turned off oven for a little over an hour, and you can see it's totally doubled in size. So what I'm going to do next is sprinkle a little bit of flour, just a tiny bit, on the whole surface of my counter. And then I'm going to pour this dough out onto that floured surface. And I'm going to gently spread it out until it's a pretty good size rectangle. You can kind of stretch it on the sides. You just kind of want it to be, even on the sides. And square off these corners nicely, because that's going to help you out when you go to roll it up. And then what I'm going to do is use about 1/4 cup of butter, which is about half a stick, and just kind of dot this whole surface with butter. And you're going to spread this softened butter out, and you're going to leave about 1 inch of room on this far edge that you're not going to butter. And then you want to take your cinnamon and brown sugar filling mix and spread it all over. Again, leaving this far edge with nothing on it. And do use all of this. And then what you want to do is you want to roll this up. And the tighter you roll it, the more layers you're going to get. So you want to roll it pretty tight. Just kind of want to roll it up like this. Kind of stretch it out a little bit like that as you go down. And these little holes like that, don't worry. Don't worry. Stretch your corners out so they cover everything. Roll it into a long tube like this. And then you're just kind of going to go down your cinnamon roll tube and mash it all together. Then you're going to take a knife, cut it in half. And you're just going to keep cutting this in half. I like to make big fat cinnamon rolls, so I'm going to only going to cut this into 8 cinnamon rolls. Oh, maybe more. So cut your cinnamon rolls in halves and halves and halves like that. Put them on your tray. If they come undone at all, just pinch them together. And then I'm going to cover these again with my clean cloth and put these back in the turned off oven for another hour.
1 hour later.
How nice do those look after having risen for another hour? I am just going to put these here on the counter. I'm going to cover them back up and I'm going to preheat my oven to 375 degrees. My oven is preheated and I am going to throw these cinnamon rolls in the oven for about 20 minutes and I'll check on them and give them then a couple of more minutes if they need it. This space around the edge, don't judge me. I misjudged the size of my pan and this is going to be fine. It'll be fine. I'm going to throw this in the 375-degree oven for 20 minutes and then I'll check on it. Look at those. They look absolutely beautiful. I am going to set them on the counter here and let them cool down for about 20 minutes before I come back and put the frosting on. I've let these cinnamon rolls rest. It's time for me to get some frosting on them. And because I made a huge double batch, I'm going to be able to put a generous spoonful onto each and every single cinnamon roll. Beautiful. Now it's going to be almost time to eat these. I'm going to let them just sit for a few minutes in their deliciousness and maybe have my dinner. And then this will be a wonderful dessert. Editing Brandy here again. I realized I had not filmed the outro, and these cinnamon rolls are entirely too beautiful to not show you the finished product. And I have to have some. They're just so good. I'm gonna pluck out the middle, of course, because I'm a food monster, and that's the best part. And you don't save that for last. It's pretty warm because I just warmed it up. And the frosting is great. It's not too sweet with a whole 8 ounces of cream cheese and only a cup and a half of powdered sugar. It it's just not it's not as sweet as you think it might be. And it's really good. I don't want to burn myself, but I really can't wait to have a bite. Mm. Mm-hmm. These are so good. They're so fluffy and light. They're perfect. The perfect cinnamon roll. And I'm also extra excited about this recipe because I kind of made it up. I cobbled together several different recipes for bread dough and different recipes for cinnamon rolls and kind of just altered it here and there to make it my own. Like I add Crisco instead of all butter. I don't know what that does, but it does something. I don't just use milk. I use water too because I know that does something too, but I'm not Hank Green, so I don't know how the science of bread works. But they're just so good. They're just so good. They're not too sweet. Perfect with a cup of hot cocoa, cup of coffee here in the wintertime. Do try this cinnamon roll recipe. And if you do, leave me a comment down below because I'd love to know how they turn out for you and if you like them as much as I do. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, whenever it is, wherever you are.